Dr. Amanda Clark stepped off the transport shuttle and felt the cold metal floor of Station Kepler beneath her boots. The massive space station stretched out in all directions around her, with its gleaming corridors and flashing lights. Hundreds of different alien species moved through the halls like a living river of strange shapes and colors. Some walked on two legs like humans, while others crawled on multiple limbs or floated in special atmosphere, suits filled with their home world. Gases Amanda carried her research equipment in one hand and held a small pet carrier in the other. Inside the carrier sat Felix, her orange tabby cat who had been her companion for the past 3 years. Felix pressed his small pink nose against the carrier's mesh window and looked out at all the strange new sights and smells around him. His green eyes were wide with curiosity rather than fear. The moment Amanda stepped into the main receiving area, conversation stopped and heads turned in their direction. Tall reptilian creatures with scaled skin pointed at the pet carrier and made clicking sounds that Amanda's universal translator turned into laughter. Short furry beings with multiple arms gestured at Felix and chattered excitedly among themselves. Even the floating jellyfish-like aliens seemed to pulse with what looked like amusement. Commander Vixtel approached Amanda with slow, deliberate steps. He stood nearly 8 feet tall, with dark green scales covering his entire body and yellow eyes that seemed to glow in the station's artificial light. His mouth was filled with sharp white teeth that he showed in what Amanda assumed was meant to be a smile, but looked more like a threat display. "Dr. Clark," Commander Vexthal said in a deep, rumbling voice, "we were expecting a serious researcher to help us understand the dangerous creatures on the planet below. Instead, you bring us someone who travels with toys and playthings." Amanda felt her face grow warm with embarrassment, but kept her voice steady and professional. "Commander, this is Felix. He's not a toy but a companion animal. Humans have lived alongside cats like Felix for thousands of years. He's part of my research into how different species can work together and adapt to new environments." This statement caused even more laughter to ripple through the crowd of aliens that had gathered to watch the new arrival. A tall insect-like creature with 4 arms and compound eyes clicked its mandibles together in rapid succession. The universal translator converted this into words that stung Amanda's pride. "The soft pink human brings an even softer creature with her," the insect being said. "How does either of them expect to survive in the harsh realities of deep space, where real predators hunt and kill without mercy?" The creature introduced itself as Zixcar, a trader from the Crytek species. His people were known throughout the galaxy as skilled hunters who tracked dangerous beasts across multiple star systems. Zixcar looked down at Felix with what Amanda could only describe as contempt. "On my homeworld," Zixcar continued, "we would use such a tiny, weak creature as bait to attract the great sandworms that we hunt for sport and food. This small, fuzzy thing would not survive even 5 minutes in true wilderness." A massive bear-like alien with thick gray fur and arms as big as tree trunks stepped forward from the crowd. His name was Thok, and he served as Commander Vexthal's personal aide. When Thok spoke, his voice was so deep that Amanda could feel the vibrations in her chest. "My people are warriors," Thok rumbled. "We test our young by sending them into the frozen mountains to hunt ice bears with nothing but their bare hands and simple spears. The weak do not return home." This tiny earth creature would freeze to death before it could even begin to hunt for food. Amanda felt anger rising in her chest, but forced herself to remain calm and diplomatic. She had expected some resistance to bringing Felix aboard the station, but had not anticipated such open mockery and hostility. Still, she had a job to do and scientific research to conduct. "I understand your concerns," Amanda said, trying to keep her voice level and respectful. "But Felix has been specially trained and has adapted to space travel remarkably well. Earth cats are actually very skilled hunters despite their small size. They have excellent reflexes, sharp claws, and hunting instincts that have been refined over millions of years of evolution. This explanation only seemed to amuse the aliens even more. A group of aquatic creatures in transparent water suits began making bubbling sounds that the translator rendered as hysterical laughter. Their leader, a being called Murdain Koloth, spoke through the water in his suit using sound waves that created ripples across the surface. Hunting instincts, Murdain Koloth said with obvious amusement. What could such a small land creature possibly hunt that would prepare it for the dangers of space exploration? Perhaps it chases the small flying insects on your world, or stalks tiny ground creatures that pose no real threat to anything. Felix chose that moment to let out a soft meow from inside his carrier. The sound was so quiet and gentle that it caused another wave of laughter to sweep through the assembled aliens. Several of them began making what Amanda assumed were attempts to imitate the sound, though their alien vocal cords produced strange warbling noises instead. "Listen to that fearsome battle cry," Zixgar said, his mandibles clicking with renewed amusement. "Surely the great predators of the galaxy will tremble in fear when they hear such a mighty roar." Commander Vexthol raised one scaled hand to quiet the crowd, but his yellow eyes still gleamed with what looked like barely contained laughter. "Dr. Clark, I hope you understand that Station Kepler is a frontier outpost where we deal with real dangers on a daily basis. The planet below us is home to creatures that could tear through reinforced steel with their claws or dissolve living tissue with their acidic breath. Perhaps it would be better if you sent your small companion back to Earth, where it can live safely among other harmless pets." Amanda clutched Felix's carrier a little tighter and lifted her chin defiantly. "Commander, I appreciate your concern for Felix's safety, but he stays with me. He's not just a pet, but a research partner. I believe that studying how humans and animals work together can provide valuable insights for interspecies cooperation throughout the galaxy." "Research partner," Thok repeated with a sound that might have been laughter. What research could this tiny creature possibly conduct? Can it analyze alien DNA samples, or operate complex scanning equipment, or translate unknown languages? "Felix contributes in ways that might not be immediately obvious," Amanda replied. "His senses are much sharper than human senses. He can detect changes in air pressure, temperature, and even electromagnetic fields that our instruments might miss. His behavior often provides early warning signs of environmental dangers." The crowd of aliens continued to murmur and chuckle among themselves as Amanda spoke. She could see that her explanations were falling on deaf ears, or whatever sensory organs these various species used for hearing. They had already made up their minds that both she and Felix were weak and unsuited for life on a frontier station. A young human officer approached Amanda through the crowd of aliens. He wore the blue uniform of station security and had lieutenant's stripes on his shoulders. His name tag read Morrison, and he looked to be in his early 30s with brown hair and kind eyes. "Dr. Clark," Lieutenant Jake Morrison said quietly, "I'm afraid I have some disturbing news. Several of the Crytek traders have started a betting pool about how long Felix will survive aboard the station. The current odds are not in his favor." Amanda felt her stomach clench with a mixture of anger and worry. What kind of bets are they making? Most of them are betting that Felix won't last more than 2 weeks. Morrison replied in a low voice so the nearby aliens couldn't overhear. Some of the more optimistic ones are giving him a full month, but none of them think he'll survive longer than that. Amanda looked around at the faces of the various alien species surrounding them. She could see the mixture of amusement and contempt in their expressions as they continued to stare at Felix's carrier. These beings came from worlds where only the strong survived and where weakness was quickly eliminated by natural selection or predator attacks. "Thank you for the warning, Lieutenant Morrison," Amanda said. "I suppose Felix and I will just have to prove them all wrong." Morrison nodded, but his expression remained concerned. "Be careful, Dr. Clark. Some of these species take their bets very seriously. I'd hate to see anything happen to either of you because someone wanted to influence the outcome of their wager." Commander Vexthal gestured toward a corridor leading away from the main receiving area. "Dr. Clark, let me show you to your quarters in the science wing. Perhaps once you've had time to settle in and see the realities of station life, you'll reconsider your decision to keep such a vulnerable creature aboard Kepler." Amanda followed the commander down the corridor while carrying Felix's carrier and her research equipment. Behind them, she could still hear the aliens talking and laughing about the strange human woman and her tiny companion. Their voices faded as distance grew between them, but Amanda knew that word of their arrival would spread quickly throughout the entire station. Felix remained calm and quiet during the walk to their new home. Occasionally, he would press his nose against the carrier's mesh window to get a better look at the passing scenery, but he showed no signs of fear or distress. Amanda spent her first week aboard Station Kepler trying to establish her research routine, while Felix explored their new environment with endless curiosity. Every morning she would walk to the science laboratory, carrying her equipment and data tablets while Felix trotted alongside her like a small orange shadow. The corridors of the station were always busy with aliens going about their daily business, and most of them still stopped to stare and make comments about the strange human and her tiny companion. The science laboratory was a large room filled with computers, scanning equipment, and analysis machines that hummed quietly as they processed samples from various worlds throughout the sector. Amanda had been assigned a workstation near the back wall where she could conduct her research on interspecies relationships and adaptation patterns. Felix quickly claimed the empty chair next to her desk as his favorite napping spot, though. He would often wander around the lab, investigating interesting smells or watching the blinking lights on various machines. Dr. Velenor, the chief science officer, made it clear from their first meeting that he disapproved of Felix's presence in the laboratory. Velenor was an Altarian, a species known for their pride and their belief that they were intellectually superior to most other races in the galaxy. He stood 7 feet tall with pale blue skin, silver hair, and eyes that seemed to glow with their own inner light. His voice was always cold and formal when he spoke to Amanda. "Dr. Clark," Velenor said during their second day working together, "I must express my concerns about allowing an uncontrolled animal to roam freely through a scientific facility. This creature could contaminate samples, damage sensitive equipment, or interfere with important experiments. Surely you understand that bringing such a liability into our workspace shows questionable judgment on your part." Amanda looked up from the genetic analysis she was conducting on tissue samples from 3 different worlds. Felix was currently stretched across her chair, with his paws hanging over the armrests, purring softly as he dozed in the warm light from the overhead panels. "Felix is very well behaved," Amanda replied calmly. "He's been trained not to interfere with scientific equipment, and his presence actually helps me focus on my work. Studies have shown that companion animals can reduce stress levels and improve cognitive function in their human partners." Velenor's glowing eyes narrowed with obvious skepticism. "Companion animals are a luxury that primitive species use to comfort themselves when they lack the mental strength to face reality alone. Advanced civilizations have no need for such emotional crutches." This conversation was overheard by several other researchers working in the laboratory, including a group of Krytok scientists who found the entire situation highly amusing. They began clicking their mandibles together in the rhythmic pattern that indicated laughter among their species. "The soft human needs her pet to help her think clearly," one of the Crytek researchers said to his companions. Perhaps we should find small animals to sit on our workstations as well. Maybe they will make us as intelligent as the mighty Earth scientists. The mockery continued throughout Amanda's first week on the station. Every time she walked through the corridors with Felix, groups of aliens would point and make comments about the strange pair. The betting pool that Lieutenant Morrison had warned her about grew larger each day as more species joined in wagering on Felix's survival. Some aliens even began following Amanda and Felix around the station, taking notes on the cat's behavior and looking for signs of weakness or distress. Felix seemed completely unbothered by all the attention. He maintained his daily routine of exploring new areas of the station, napping in sunny spots near the observation windows, and occasionally playing with small objects that caught his interest. His calm demeanor in the face of so much hostility impressed Amanda, though she worried that the constant scrutiny might eventually stress him out. On her 5th day aboard the station, Amanda made a discovery that changed everything while analyzing soil samples from the planet below Station Kepler. She found traces of organic compounds that indicated the presence of several extremely dangerous predator species. The planet, designated as Kepler 442c, had been classified as mostly harmless with only minor wildlife concerns, but Amanda's detailed analysis revealed a much more threatening ecosystem. The most disturbing discovery was evidence of a creature that local inhabitants called the Fangbeast. According to the limited data in the station's computers, Fangbeasts were serpentine predators, roughly the size of large dogs with venomous fangs and an unusual ability to phase partially out of normal space. This phasing ability made them nearly impossible to detect with standard sensors until they were ready to strike their prey. Amanda spent 2 full days verifying her findings and cross-referencing them with reports from trading expeditions to a planet's surface. The picture that emerged was deeply concerning. Fangbeast attacks on the planet had been increasing over the past several months, and the creatures seemed to be growing bolder in their hunting patterns. Even more troubling was evidence that some Fangbeasts had been spotted near the cargo loading, areas where ships regularly traveled between the planet and the station. On her 7th day aboard Kepler, Amanda requested a meeting with the senior staff to present her findings. The conference room was filled with the station's most important personnel, including Commander Vexthol, Dr. Velinar, Security Chief Tony Martinez, and representatives from the major alien species that used the station as a trading hub. Amanda stood at the front of the room with her data tablets and analysis reports, while Felix sat quietly on the floor beside her feet. She could see the barely concealed amusement on many of the alien faces as they noticed her companion's presence in what was supposed to be a serious scientific briefing. "Commander," Amanda began, "my analysis of samples from Kepler 442c has revealed the presence of several dangerous predator species that were not included in the original planetary survey. Most concerning is a creature called the Fangbeast, which poses a significant threat to anyone traveling to or from the planet's surface." She activated the wall display and showed images of the biochemical traces she had found in the soil samples. The data clearly indicated the presence of potent neurotoxins and evidence of aggressive hunting behavior. "These creatures are not just dangerous to people on the planet," Amanda continued. "The increased trading activity over the past year has likely disturbed their natural habitat and hunting patterns. There's a real possibility that one or more of these predators could make their way aboard cargo ships and end up here on the station." Commander Vexthol leaned back in his chair and made a sound that might have been a sigh. His yellow eyes fixed on Felix, who was calmly grooming his paw, apparently unaware that he was the center of attention. "Dr. Clark," the commander said, "while I appreciate your thoroughness in analyzing the planetary samples, I think you may be letting your imagination run away with you. Our cargo screening procedures are designed to prevent exactly the kind of contamination you're describing. Besides, even if such a creature somehow made it aboard the station, our security systems would detect and eliminate it quickly. Security. Chief Martinez nodded in agreement. He was a stocky human in his 40s, with graying hair and the kind of confident bearing that came from years of military experience. Dr. Clark, I've reviewed the security protocols for all incoming cargo. Every container is scanned for biological hazards before it's allowed into the station. The chance of a predator making it past our screening systems is virtually zero. Dr. Vellner stood up and activated his own data display, showing the official planetary survey that had been conducted when Kepler 442c was first discovered. The original survey team classified this world as having only minor wildlife hazards. They spent 3 months on the surface, conducting detailed studies of the local ecosystem. I find it difficult to believe that they somehow missed dangerous predators of the type you're describing. Amanda felt frustration building in her chest as she realized that her warnings were not being taken seriously. The original survey was conducted during the planet's winter season, when many predator species would have been dormant or less active. My analysis shows clear evidence that these creatures are not only present, but becoming more aggressive as trading activity increases. Zick Scar, a Crytek trader who had mocked Amanda on her first day, clicked his mandibles in what sounded like dismissive laughter. Perhaps the human scientist sees dangers everywhere because she travels with such a weak and defenseless companion. When you spend your time protecting something so fragile, you begin to imagine threats that do not really exist. This comment drew chuckles from several other aliens in the room. Even some of the human personnel seemed amused by the suggestion. That Amanda's concern for Felix was affecting her scientific judgment. Fuck. Commander Vexthul's massive aide rumbled with deep laughter. The tiny Earth creature has made its human paranoid and fearful. She sees predators hiding in every shadow because she knows her small companion could not defend itself against any real threat. Felix chose that moment to stand up and stretch, arching his back in the way that cats do when they wake from a nap. 3 days after Amanda's warning meeting, her worst fears came true in the most terrifying way possible. The Fangbeast arrived aboard Station Kepler, hidden inside a cargo container that had passed through all the security screening systems without triggering a single alarm. The creature had somehow made itself nearly undetectable by using its strange phasing ability to exist partially outside normal space where the station's sensors could not find it. The first sign of trouble came during the night shift, when Ensign Peter Collins was monitoring the environmental control systems from his station in the engineering section. Peter was a young human officer who had joined the space service only 2 years earlier and was still learning how to interpret the complex readouts from the station's various monitoring systems. He noticed unusual bio-readings moving through the ventilation ducts, but initially assumed they were caused by some kind of equipment malfunction. Peter tried running diagnostics on the environmental sensors, but found nothing wrong with the hardware or software. The bio-readings continued to move through different sections of the station's ductwork in patterns that seemed almost purposeful, as if something alive was traveling through the ventilation system with a specific destination in mind. When Peter expanded his sensor sweep to cover a larger area of the station, he detected traces of unknown organic compounds in the air circulation system. These compounds included complex proteins and chemical markers that did not match any known species in the station's database. More disturbing were traces of what appeared to be venom components that were highly toxic to most known forms of life. Peter immediately tried to contact his supervisor, but found that the communication system was experiencing strange interference. His calls would connect for a few seconds before cutting out with bursts of static that made conversation impossible. The interference seemed to be coming from somewhere inside the station itself, rather than from any external source. as Peter worked frantically to re-establish communications. He began to hear soft scraping sounds coming from the ventilation grate directly above his workstation. The sounds were rhythmic and deliberate, like something with claws or scales moving slowly through the metal ductwork. The sounds would stop for several minutes at a time before starting again from a slightly different location. Peter looked up at the ventilation grate and saw that some of the screws holding it in place were loose, as if something had been pushing against it from the inside. Small scratches in the metal around the edges of the grate suggested that whatever was moving through the ducts had very sharp claws or talons that the bio readings on. Peter's screen suddenly spiked to maximum levels as whatever was in the ventilation system moved directly over his position. The organic compound traces became so concentrated that they triggered automatic air purification systems throughout that section of the station. Warning lights began flashing on Peter's control panel as the computers detected potentially hazardous biological contamination. Peter reached for the emergency communication switch that would broadcast an alert to all sections of the station. But before his hand could reach the controls, the ventilation grate above him burst open with a sound like tearing metal. A long serpentine shape dropped from the opening and landed on his workstation with incredible speed and precision. The Fangbeast was even more terrifying than Amanda's research had suggested. It was nearly 6 feet long with iridescent scales that seemed to shimmer and change color as it moved. Its body was sleek and muscular like a giant snake, but with 4 small legs that ended in razor-sharp claws. The creature's head was triangular and filled with rows of needle-like fangs that dripped with glowing venom. Most disturbing were the Fangbeast's eyes, which were multifaceted like those of an insect, but much larger and more intelligent. They seemed to look right through Peter, as if they could see not just his physical form, but also his thoughts and fears. The creature's gaze was hypnotic and paralyzing in a way that made it almost impossible for Peter to move or think clearly. The Fangbeast struck with lightning speed, sinking its fangs deep into Peter's neck before he could even cry out for help. The creature's venom worked immediately, shutting down Peter's nervous system and paralyzing his muscles, while keeping him conscious and aware of what was happening to him. Peter could feel the poison spreading through his bloodstream like liquid fire, but he could not move or speak or call for help. With his last conscious thought before the venom overwhelmed his system completely, Peter managed to activate the emergency alert beacon that would signal danger to the rest of the station. The beacon sent out a coded transmission that identified his location and indicated a medical emergency. Though it could not specify the exact nature of the threat, the emergency response team arrived at Peter's workstation within minutes of receiving the alert signal. Dr. Kate Sullivan, the station's chief medical officer, led the team and immediately recognized the symptoms of severe neurological poisoning when she examined Peter's unconscious form. His breathing was shallow and irregular. His pulse was barely detectable, and his pupils were dilated and unresponsive to light. Dr. Sullivan had served on frontier medical teams for over 15 years and had treated victims of attacks from various dangerous alien creatures. She recognized the distinctive bite marks on Peter's neck and the particular way the venom was affecting his nervous system. Her face went pale as she realized what had happened. "This is Fangbeast envenomation," she told the emergency team. "We need to get him to the medical bay immediately and start treatment with neural stabilizers. Without proper antivenom, he'll be dead within hours." The problem was that Station Kepler's medical bay was not equipped with Fangbeast antivenom, because the creatures were not supposed to exist anywhere near the station. The original planetary survey had classified Kepler 442c as having only minor wildlife hazards, so no one had thought to stock treatments for the planet's most dangerous predators. Commander Vexthal arrived at the engineering section as the medical team was preparing to transport Peter to the medical bay. The commander's yellow eyes swept over the damaged ventilation grate and the clear signs of a predator attack. His expression was grim as he realized that Amanda's warnings had been completely accurate. "Dr. Sullivan," Commander Vexthal said, "what are Peter's chances of survival without the proper antivenom?" Dr. Sullivan shook her head grimly. "Not good, Commander. Fangbeast venom attacks the central nervous system and causes progressive paralysis. We can slow the process with neural stabilizers and keep his vital organs functioning artificially. But without the specific antivenom, the paralysis will eventually reach his heart and lungs." Security Chief Martinez arrived with a team of armed guards and immediately began examining the area around Peter's workstation. The ventilation grate had been torn open from the inside with tremendous force, and there were claw marks in the metal that went several inches deep. Strange organic residue around the opening glowed faintly under the security team's scanning lights. "Commander," Martinez said, "whatever did this is still loose somewhere in the station. The creature could be anywhere in the ventilation system by now, and our standard sensors can't track it because of its phasing ability." Commander Vexthal ordered an immediate station-wide lockdown. All personnel were instructed to return to their quarters and remain there until further notice. Security teams began systematic sweeps of every deck and section, but their efforts were hampered by the Fangbeast's ability to phase in and out of normal space. The creature could hide inside walls or floors where scanners could not detect it, then emerge without warning to attack anyone who came too close. The station's alien population, who had been so confident and mocking just days earlier, now showed their true colors when faced with real danger. The Crytek traders, despite all their boasts about being mighty hunters, immediately barricaded themselves in their quarters and refused to come out. Zix Carr, who had laughed at Felix and called him weak prey, sent messages to the command center requesting immediate evacuation to a safer location. The aquatic Madani locked themselves inside their specialized water-filled chambers and activated every security system they could find. Even the massive Gorathan warriors, like Thok, seemed nervous and jumpy, constantly looking over their shoulders, as if expecting the Fangbeast to materialize behind them at any moment. Dr. Valinor, the proud Altarian science officer who had dismissed Amanda's warnings as paranoid fantasy, now worked frantically to analyze the organic residue left behind by the creature. His hands shook as he operated his scanning equipment, and his usually cold and formal voice carried a note of fear when he reported his findings to the command center. "The creature's biochemistry is unlike anything in our databases," Valinor reported. "Its ability to phase between dimensions makes it nearly impossible to track or predict. Standard weapons may not be effective because the creature can become intangible at will." As the hours passed and the security teams continued their fruitless search, more crew members reported glimpses of something serpentine moving through shadows or disappearing through solid walls. The Fangbeasts seemed to be toying with them, appearing just long enough to be seen before vanishing again into the spaces between normal reality. The hours dragged by as Station Kepler remained locked down while security teams searched every corridor and room for the deadly Fangbeast. Amanda worked at her desk, trying to analyze the creature's behavioral patterns and predict where it might strike next, but the lack of reliable data made her task nearly impossible. The Fangbeast's ability to phase in and out of normal space meant that it could appear anywhere at any time without warning. Felix had become increasingly restless as the night progressed. The orange tabby cat paced around their quarters with his tail twitching and his ears constantly moving to track sounds that Amanda could not hear. Every few minutes he would stop and stare at the ventilation grate near Amanda's bed. His green eyes focused with the kind of intense concentration that Amanda had only seen when he was hunting insects back on Earth. Amanda tried to focus on her research, but found herself watching Felix's behavior more than her computer screen. She had lived with Felix for 3 years and knew all his moods and habits, but she had never seen him act quite like this before. His movements were more fluid and deliberate, and there was a tension in his muscles that suggested he was preparing for something important. Around midnight station time, Amanda finally gave up trying to work and decided to get some rest. She changed into her sleeping clothes and settled into bed while Felix continued his patrol around the room. The cat showed no interest in joining her on the bed as he usually did, instead positioning himself near the ventilation grate where he could watch and listen for any signs of movement in the ductwork. Amanda had been asleep for about 2 hours. When Felix's behavior changed dramatically, the cat suddenly became very still and alert, his fur standing up along his spine and his ears pointed directly at the ventilation grate. Amanda woke up when she felt the change in atmosphere in the room. Though she could not identify exactly what had disturbed her sleep, Felix moved with complete silence toward the center of the room, his body low to the ground in the classic stalking posture that cats had used for millions of years when hunting prey. His green eyes never left the ventilation grate as he positioned himself between Amanda's bed and the potential threat that only he seemed able to detect. Amanda held her breath as she watched Felix's careful movements. She could see that something was happening, but her human senses could not pick up whatever signals the cat was receiving. The room seemed completely quiet and normal to her, but Felix's behavior indicated that danger was very close. Then Amanda heard it, a faint scraping sound coming from inside the ventilation system directly above her bed. The sound was so quiet that she might have missed it entirely if Felix had not alerted her to listen carefully. It was the same type of rhythmic scraping that Ensign Collins had reported hearing just before the Fangbeast attacked him. The scraping sounds grew slightly louder and more frequent as whatever was in the ductwork moved closer to the grate opening. Amanda could see small particles of dust and debris falling from the edges of the grate as something large moved through the confined space above her quarters. Her heart began racing as she realized that the Fangbeast had found her, and Felix. Amanda wanted to activate the emergency communication system to call for help, but she was afraid that any sudden movement or sound might trigger an immediate attack. The Fangbeast was clearly already in position to strike, and security teams would not be able to reach her quarters in time to prevent her death if the creature decided to attack. Felix remained perfectly still as the sounds from the ventilation system continued. His hunting instincts had taken over completely, and he was now operating on reflexes that had been refined over millions of years of feline evolution. Amanda could see that every muscle in his small body was coiled and ready for action, though she could not imagine how such a tiny creature could possibly defend against something as dangerous as a Fangbeast. The scraping sound stopped suddenly, and the room became completely silent except for Amanda's rapid breathing and heartbeat. She could feel the presence of something malevolent waiting just above her bed, though she could not see or hear any direct evidence of the creature's location. Felix remained motionless in his stalking position, his eyes fixed on the ventilation grate with unwavering focus. Without any warning, the ventilation grate began to phase out of normal space as the Fangbeast used its dimensional abilities to pass through the solid metal barrier. Amanda watched in terror as the creature's serpentine form slowly materialized in the dim light of her quarters. The Fangbeast was even more horrifying than she had imagined from her research data. The creature was nearly 6 feet long, with scales that shifted between different colors as it moved. Its body was sleek and powerful like a giant snake, but with 4 small legs that ended in claws that looked sharp enough to cut through steel. The Fangbeast's head was triangular and filled with rows of fangs that dripped with bioluminescent venom that glowed softly in the darkness. Most terrifying were the creature's multifaceted eyes that seemed to see everything at once. They locked onto Amanda's motionless form with the cold intelligence of a perfect predator that had found its next meal. The Fangbeast began to coil its body in preparation for a strike, its muscles bunching and tensing as it prepared to inject its deadly venom into Amanda's bloodstream. Amanda knew that any movement would trigger an immediate attack, so she forced herself to remain completely still, even though every instinct screamed at her to run or call for help. The Fangbeast was less than 10 feet away from her bed and could cover that distance in a fraction of a second. She closed her eyes and prepared for the pain of venomous fangs piercing her flesh, but the attack never came. Instead, Amanda heard a soft sound that she had never heard from Felix before, a low rumbling that was almost like purring, but with a deeper and more threatening tone. She opened her eyes and saw that Felix had moved even closer to the Fangbeast, without making any sound that she could detect. The small orange cat was no longer in a normal stalking position, but had assumed a stance that Amanda had never seen before. His back was arched and his tail was held straight up, but there was something different about his posture that made him look larger and more dangerous than his actual size. His green eyes were fixed on the Fangbeast with an intensity that was almost hypnotic. The Fangbeast seemed confused by Felix's behavior. The creature was accustomed to hunting prey that would either flee in panic or freeze in terror when confronted by its presence. Felix was doing neither of these things, instead moving in a slow, deliberate pattern around the Fangbeast while maintaining perfect silence and control. Amanda realized that Felix was using hunting instincts that went back to the earliest days of feline evolution, when cats had to survive alongside much larger and more dangerous predators. He was not trying to flee or hide from the Fangbeast, but was instead treating it as prey that needed to be stalked and eliminated. The Fangbeast began to relax its coiled striking position as it became focused on Felix's movements. The creature's multifaceted eyes tracked the cat's graceful stalking pattern, and its head swayed slightly from side to side as if it was being mesmerized by the rhythmic motion. The deadly predator that had terrorized an entire space station was being drawn into an ancient dance between hunter and hunted. Felix continued his stalking pattern for several minutes, moving in slow circles around the Fangbeast while never taking his eyes off the creature's head and neck area. His movements were so fluid and controlled that they seemed almost like a form of performance art, each step calculated to maintain the Fangbeast's attention while positioning himself for the perfect strike. Amanda watched in amazement as her small companion demonstrated hunting skills that she had never realized he possessed. Felix was not just a pet or a companion animal, but was actually a highly evolved predator whose instincts had been shaped by millions of years of survival against creatures far larger and more dangerous than himself. The Fangbeast's body language continued to change as Felix's stalking pattern had its desired effect. The creature's muscles began to relax, and its coiled striking position gradually unwound as it became more and more focused on the hypnotic movements of the small orange cat. The deadly alien predator was being outmaneuvered by hunting tactics that were older than recorded history. Felix sensed that his moment had arrived. In one explosive movement that was almost too fast for Amanda to follow, he launched himself directly at the Fangbeast's head with his claws extended and his small jaws open wide. His target was precise and devastating, aimed at the spot just behind the creature's skull with a spinal cord connected to the brain. The small orange cat that everyone had dismissed as weak and harmless struck with the focused precision of a predator that had been designed by evolution to kill creatures much larger than himself. His claws found the gaps between the Fangbeast's scales, while his teeth clamped down on the creature's neck with a grip that would not release until the battle was over. The Fangbeast thrashed violently as it realized that it had been outmaneuvered by what it had assumed was harmless prey. The creature's phasing ability activated reflexively as it tried to escape. But Felix held on with the tenacious determination that had made Earth's cats such successful hunters for millions of years. The battle between Felix and the Fangbeast lasted only seconds, but to Amanda it felt like hours as she watched her small companion fight against a creature that could have easily killed both of them. Felix's claws had found their target with surgical precision, piercing the gaps between the Fangbeast's scales and reaching the vital nerve clusters that controlled the creature's motor functions. His small teeth had clamped down on the exact spot where the spinal cord connected to the brain, severing critical pathways with the instinctive knowledge that millions of years of evolution had built into his species. The Fangbeast's thrashing became weaker and more erratic as Felix maintained his death grip on the creature's neck. The alien predator's ability to phase in and out of normal space was useless against an opponent who was already in direct physical contact, and who refused to let go no matter how violently the creature moved. Felix rode the Fangbeast's movements like a rodeo rider, his claws and teeth never loosening their hold on his target. Within moments, the Fangbeast's movements slowed and then stopped entirely as the damage to its nervous system shut down its vital functions. The creature that had terrorized an entire space station lay motionless on the floor of Amanda's quarters, killed by a house cat that weighed less than 10 pounds. Felix released his grip and calmly walked away from his defeated opponent, sitting down to groom his paws as if nothing unusual had happened. Amanda stared at the scene in complete shock, unable to process what she had just witnessed. The deadly predator that had put the entire station on lockdown was dead, killed by her companion, who was now cleaning his fur with the same casual attitude he showed after catching a mouse back on Earth. She reached for the emergency communication panel with trembling hands and activated the alert signal that would bring security. Teams to her quarters. Security. Chief Martinez arrived first, accompanied by a team of armed guards who burst through Amanda's door, expecting to find either a crime scene or an ongoing battle with the Fangbeast. Instead, they found Amanda sitting on her bed in her nightclothes, while Felix continued his grooming routine nearby. The dead Fangbeast lay stretched across the floor, its iridescent scales now dull and lifeless. "Dr. Clark," Martinez said, his voice filled with confusion and disbelief. "Are you injured? What happened here?" Amanda gestured toward Felix, who had finished cleaning his paws and was now washing behind his ears. "Felix killed it," she said simply. "The Fangbeast came through the ventilation grate to attack me, and Felix fought it and won." Martinez looked at the small orange cat and then at the 6-foot-long alien predator lying dead on the floor. His expression suggested that he was having trouble accepting what his eyes were showing him. "Dr. Clark, are you sure you're not in shock? Maybe you should let Dr. Sullivan examine you to make sure you weren't injured during the attack." Dr. Sullivan arrived with her medical team a few minutes later and immediately began examining both Amanda and the dead Fangbeast. Amanda showed no signs of injury or venom exposure, while the Fangbeast displayed wounds that were precise and devastating. The creature's spinal cord had been severed at exactly the right location to cause instant paralysis, and its venom sacs had been punctured to prevent any posthumous poisoning. These wounds show an incredible understanding of alien anatomy, Dr. Sullivan reported to the growing crowd of personnel who had gathered in Amanda's quarters. The strikes were made with surgical precision to the most vulnerable points on the creature's body. "I've never seen anything like this level of tactical knowledge in a combat situation." Commander Vexthul arrived as Dr. Sullivan was completing her examination of the Fangbeast. The tall reptilian officer looked around the room with his yellow eyes, taking in the scene of the battle and the small cat who was now curled up on Amanda's bed as if taking a nap. His expression was difficult to read, but Amanda thought she detected something that might have been embarrassment or shame. "Dr. Clark," Commander Vexthul said formally, It appears that I owe you and your companion an apology. Your warnings about the Fangbeast were completely accurate, and we should have taken your concerns more seriously. Word of Felix's victory spread through Station Kepler with incredible speed. Within hours, every alien species aboard the station had heard about the small Earth cat who had killed a Fangbeast in single combat. The reactions varied from species to species, but all of them involved a fundamental reassessment of both Felix and humanity in general. The Crytek traders were the first to change their attitude toward Felix. Zix Carr, who had mocked the cat as weak prey on Amanda's first day aboard the station, now approached her with what could only be described as reverence. His compound eyes reflected genuine respect as he looked at Felix, who was sitting calmly in Amanda's lap during their meeting in the science laboratory. "Dr. Clark," Zix Carr said, his mandibles clicking in the pattern that indicated formal respect. "Among his people, I have greatly underestimated your companion's capabilities. Among the Crytek, we have legends of small hunters who could defeat yours many times their size through superior skill and intelligence. I believe Felix belongs in such legends." Zix Carr presented Felix with a collar made from rare crystalline materials that were considered sacred among the Crytek people. The collar was traditionally given only to the greatest hunters in their society, and offering it to Felix represented a level of honor that few non-Crytek had ever received. The other alien species aboard the station showed similar changes in their attitudes toward both Felix and Amanda. The massive Gorathan warrior Thok, who had boasted about his people's hunting prowess, now spoke of Felix with the kind of respect usually reserved for legendary fighters from his homeworld's history. "The small Earth hunter has taught us an important lesson," Thok rumbled during a gathering in the station's main conference room. "Size and strength mean nothing without the wisdom to use them properly. Felix possesses the heart of a true warrior, and his human companion showed great wisdom in bringing such a defender to our station." Even Dr. Velenar, the proud Altarian science officer who had dismissed Amanda's research as paranoid fantasy, was forced to acknowledge that his assumptions about both humans and their companion animals had been completely wrong. He requested detailed information about feline hunting behaviors and asked Amanda to help him understand how Earth's domestic cats had developed such sophisticated combat instincts. "I have studied the biology of hundreds of different species," Velenar admitted during one of their research sessions, "but I have never encountered a creature that combines such apparent harmlessness with such devastating effectiveness. Felix represents a level of evolutionary refinement that my people would do well to study and understand." The betting pool about Felix's survival had been completely forgotten, replaced by something far more meaningful. The various alien species aboard Station Kepler began sharing stories and information about their own relationships with other creatures from their homeworlds. Many of them had dismissed such relationships as primitive or unnecessary, but Felix's heroic actions had shown them the value of interspecies cooperation and partnership. Security Chief Martinez requested a complete briefing on feline hunting behaviors and defensive capabilities. He recognized that Earth's domestic cats possessed combat skills that could be valuable in dealing with other alien threats that might arise in the future. His security teams began studying Amanda's research data to better understand how seemingly harmless Earth creatures had developed such effective survival strategies. "Dr. Clark," Martinez said during one of their planning sessions, "I think we've all learned an important lesson about making assumptions based on appearances. Felix may look like a harmless pet, but he's actually a highly evolved predator whose instincts have been shaped by millions of years of survival against much larger and more dangerous opponents." The most significant change came from Commander Vexthul himself, who issued a station-wide memo acknowledging that humanity's relationship with companion animals represented a form of interspecies cooperation that other races should study and emulate rather than mock or dismiss. The memo was distributed throughout the entire sector and became required reading for all personnel serving on frontier stations. Amanda's research took on new dimensions as she found herself at the center of a galaxy-wide discussion about the bonds between different species and the unexpected strengths that could emerge from such partnerships. Scientists from dozens of different worlds requested copies of her data and wanted to learn more about how humans and cats had developed their unique relationship over thousands of years. Felix, for his part, seemed completely uninterested in his newfound fame. He continued his daily routine of exploring the science laboratory, napping in comfortable spots near the observation windows, and occasionally accepting the various treats and gifts that crew members now regularly offered him. The only change in his behavior was that he seemed more relaxed and confident, as if he had proven something important to himself, as well as to everyone around him. As Amanda worked late one evening several weeks after the Fangbeast incident, she looked over at Felix, who was stretched out contentedly on her desk.